Property predictions tend to lean heavily on patterns, evident in our market since the early 1980s. Now a new theory suggests the boom cycle model we have been relying on is busted. Joining us now to explain whether he buys that or not is One Roof property commentator Ashley Church. Tēnā koe, good morning.
Jack.
So how regularly does New Zealand, on the evidence we have so far, experience property booms?
So it experiences them roughly once every 10 to 12 years, and this particular commentary, which comes from a very respected economist, I might say, somebody who's well known to most people who wrote recently on this, is basically saying that because of a range of changes to the market currently, so he's talking about things like population numbers dropping off, the interest rate numbers probably not going any lower, changes to what's happening to the baby boomers and the reality they're probably going to start selling their properties off over the next few years, and that's going to cause property prices to go down. He's suggesting that for all of those reasons it's unlikely that we will see another property boom. This is probably the last of them. Problem with that is that it implies that there was something in each of those booms that was consistent. There was something that was the same about each of those booms, which has now disappeared, and because it's disappeared, we're not going to have the same pattern going forward. History doesn't support that at all. Right. History doesn't support that at all. In fact, if you actually look at the history of the market and you look at each of those four booms, we don't know exactly when each of them peaked, Jack. There's a bit of controversy around that, but let's just say, for the sake of argument, for the sake of what I want to talk to you about, that each of them peaked in a year ending with 6. So 1996, 2006, 1986 and 2016. Yep. Each of those markets actually had very, very different complexions. And I'll just there's a bit of information, but I'll try and get through it pretty quickly. If we go to 1986, for example, we'd just come out of the Muldoon reforms, massive economic reforms, followed by Rogernomics under the fourth Labor government, which went massive reforms in the other direction. 18% inflation, 20% interest rates, huge changes to the economy. 10 years later, in 1996, completely different environment. We had interest rates had come right down to 12%. Inflation was running at that stage at 4%. We had some controls over lending. And then again, 10 years forward from that, different environment again. Helen Clark had come in. They had changed what National had done with state housing. Interest rates had come down further to 10%. Inflation was still running at about 4%. And then forward to 2016, massive. In each of those previous two cycles, we'd had negative outflows of people, so we were losing people. Come forward to 2016, we've got huge increases in population, 70,000 people in 1 year. Interest rates down to historic lows of now dropping under 4%, 1.6% inflation. My point in all of that is that there's actually, apart from the fact that in each of those cycles property prices doubled, there's actually no consistency.
Okay, well, this is the thing. It's consistent in terms of the cycle's time period, so we're looking at every 10 years, more or less, but actually the external factors that lead to each of those
are
respective
completely different in respect of each of those booms.
Which is to suggest that there's no reason that something else might not come around the corner. Yes, interest rates might not be cut anytime soon. They may be, especially with the OCR announcement this week. But actually, there's nothing to suggest that in another 7 or 8 years there won't be another external factor causing another boom.
And in fact, I would argue that there will be. Incidentally, there is one caveat to all of that, and the one thing is that although interest rates changed, in each of those booms they came down. So they came down from that high of over 20% in 1986 down to 12%, then 10%, and now trending under 4%.
So that's the one consistent factor?
Well, the consistent factor in that is that they're dropping, and you could actually argue that as prices have gone up, dropping interest rates have actually made it easier to afford property. But I'm not sure that I buy into that, and for all of those other reasons, I actually suspect that this is going to make no difference to the trend cycle going forward.
So what do you expect will happen going forward?
I think that in 10 years' time, 2026, we'll be looking at another doubling of house prices over where they were in 2016, that we will have gone through essentially the same cycle, that the underlying circumstances might be quite different. The Reserve Bank might have tried to do different things, but essentially that pattern that we've had over the last 40 years will continue into that fifth decade.
Is there any way to predict at this stage what external factors might cause that boom?
Not really, because you could get a government that comes in and completely upends the entire housing market. You could get the 100,000 homes that Kiwi Build's purported to build could actually be built, and that'll therefore take pressure off the market there. So you could sit here now and I could pontificate about what I thought the market was going to look like, and in 10 years' time that aspect of the economy could look totally different.
But I mean, if we are looking at, the US has huge national debt that's continuing to go nuts under Trump. If we are looking at a stock market crash, hope we don't see one of those in the next couple of years. I mean, there are
one in 87.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, there are plenty of economists who are going to say, you know what, we're probably going to be going through a tough period over the next few years, and that if pulling out of that tough period we were to cut interest rates, then we could expect a similar outcome in the property market.
So what I think we can expect is whatever form it takes, whatever it looks like, economic changes are constant. There are going to be changes to the economy. The question in this debate is whether that's going to impact on that pattern of cycles, and my argument is no, it's not.
All right. Thanks for your time. As always, really appreciate it. One Roof property commentator Ashley Church.